No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live, episode number 177. I'm saying live because I just saw Alex P in our chat say this show pretends to be live. I wouldn't be able to be saying that, would I, Alex P, if we were pretending to be live? We are very much live. Breaking right now, I can reveal details of a special mission to the US to try and save the life of political prisoner Tommy Robinson, currently languishing in solitary at HMP Woodhill, where a number of high-profile advocates hope to gain the support of US Vice President JD Vance. Now, this bombshell development, which I'm going to tell you much more about, comes as Ezra Levant of Rebel News and Jordan Peterson reveal the nightmare scenario that they now expect the activist and citizen journalist to die behind bars.
So he dies in prison. That's not going to be good. Or he comes out looking like the emaciated, broken down survivor of a concentration camp.
You said a terrible, and I hope it's not prophetic. I am worried that one day he will meet his demise in prison, and I've talked to him about
analysis you won't get from the MSM in my digest next. Then my superstar panel weighs in Fair Fuel campaigner and former London mayoral candidate Howard Cox and Reform UK supporter Nicholas Lissack. Also coming up on the show today, the Reform UK civil war kicks off with Rupert Lowe making his leadership pitch in the Daily Mail as Nigel Farage's allies hit back. Two-tier Britain exposed by Robert Jenrick, revealing straight white men are now at a disadvantage when being sentenced for a crime. And the launch of a brand new segment, Looney, Lefties Go Wild, today featuring Donica McCarthy, Ashley James, Paul Brand, Sly News and Kathy Newman of Channel 4 News. Then in the uncancelled after show on Substack, Meghan Markle's As Ever sideshow continues as she lies to US chat show host Drew Barrymore. Royal YouTube sensation, according to Taz, joins me and we're going to take you through all of that on Substack, www.outspoken.live. Of course, in the live chat, because we are live right now, you can also vote for today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass because it is decided by you. The nominees, also decided by you, by the way, from the Dan Wootton Outspoken Club on X, which I'd love you to become a part of. Here are the nominees. Shabna Mahmood, nominated by Steve Shasby. The Justice Secretary, of course, has introduced these new sentencing guidelines which have blatant bias against Christians and straight white men. More on that later in the show. Narinder Kaur, nominated by London Snow 251 for her hatred on our Dan. This was all because she's come for me over the review, I think, of Meghan Markle's With Love. And, Narinder's a friend, but she race baits, doesn't she, when it comes to Meghan Markle. And James O'Brien, nominated by Loose HHH. And she said, excuse my French, for that effing haircut. And so you see, he's trying to cover up the bruise on his face and he looks like Hitler. Oh, get voting right now. Give me your comments during the show. I'll read out the best at the end. Stick with us. But now, let's go. This is now an emergency situation regarding the UK's political prisoner, Tommy Robinson. The psychiatric report on his solitary confinement at HMP Woodhill is in, and it's dire. I'll get to it in just a moment. The highly respected psychologist and author Jordan Peterson and the brilliant Ezra Levant of Rebel News are now both on Tommy Death Watch, so concerned about his treatment by the British state behind bars. I'll reveal their stark warnings too. But to their forever shame, the British MSM and political establishment continue to look away from this scandal, literally ignoring the egregious breach of an activist and citizen journalist's human rights because they don't want to appear to be advocating for a man who has become radioactive in polite society. Well, today, I can reveal details of a special mission to the US to try and save Tommy's life, where a number of high-profile advocates hope to gain the support of US Vice President JD Vance. Paul Thorpe, the businessman and independent journalist, has this exclusive and very worrying message.
So Dan, I'm currently out here in Spain. Obviously the news today from the clinical psychologist about the condition of Tommy's mind and the horrible potentials that he faces long term for the future is obviously a huge concern to all of us. And this is now getting to the point where our country, the United Kingdom, should be absolutely and utterly ashamed at the appalling treatment of a human being. Let's take the name out of the equation for a minute. This is about a fellow human being whose human rights are being abused on a daily basis. Then I am hopefully closing in with a meeting in the United States with the Vice President of the United States, JD Vance. I am working extremely hard on that meeting. I'm hoping that I can make it happen because we need the world to take notice as to what's happening, not only to our country, to our freedom of speech, and indeed to, in my opinion, Britain's greatest hero since Winston Churchill. This is a travesty, and it's thanks to people like yourself that are keeping our country sane. Dan, God bless you, keep up the great work, and hopefully I'll see you soon.
Now, I'm doing what I can to help Paul with his important mission to the US. And given Elon Musk is now funding 2 of Tommy's legal cases, you would think JD Vance, who has shown so much concern about the retraction of free speech in the UK, should be on board. Now, our situation in regards to human rights actually formed part of Jordan Peterson's important conversation with Ezra Levant about this issue.
They are the UK government, in my assessment, is extremely nervous about how to deal with Trump and Trump's
They should be.
buddy, Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And JD Vance as well, I'll add in there, who said the first nuclear-armed Islamic country will be the UK.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you got Pakistan already. But so JD Vance is skeptical of the UK. Elon Musk is very skeptical and has been shaking the UK on these issues.
Yeah.
And he tweeted "Free Tommy Robinson" on New Year's Day.
Yeah.
So the UK government doesn't know how to proceed with Trump.
Well, they know to some degree because they've got Tommy in isolation. That's their strategy.
What would they do?
Boy, that's a strategy that could seriously backfire.
Well,
I can't.
And of course, it could backfire. But the way that it could backfire almost doesn't bear thinking about. However, Ezra and Jordan believe we must, which is why they both then admitted they fear Tommy could or possibly will die behind bars.
So he dies in prison. That's not going to be good. Or he comes out looking like the emaciated, broken down survivor of a concentration camp.
You said a terrible, and I hope it's not prophetic. I am worried that one day he will meet his demise in prison, and I've talked to him about.
And the consequences, of course, of such an outcome for British society, well, it would be severe.
With him in Spain, and I said, we've got to do this because it's a morbid thing to talk about.
Yeah,
but it is a real possibility, and so we have helped.
Yeah, well, he's got to withstand 9 months in solitary, and I mean, he's already been through hell and has got his traumas to bear, in reality, and so yeah, it's a real 9 months, man. That's a long time.
Yet still, the establishment in Britain ignores what is going on, even after this horror update from Tommy's official team on what they call his state torture. So laying out the situation, they say Tommy Robinson has suffered 128 plus days so far in solitary confinement, 22 hours a day locked in a cell, facing an 18-month sentence for a non-crime of showing the public a documentary he was banned from showing. His legal team appointed an independent clinical psychologist with a doctorate and 15 plus years in NHS forensic mental health to assess him, and they deliver a damning report. This is mental torture. Assessing him with ADHD and complex post-traumatic stress disorder, she warns solitary confinement is directly related to the reactivation of past CPTSD due to a similar environment. He has difficulties coping, exacerbated by ADHD. He is deteriorating. And then these words from Tommy Robinson himself. I've lost my head. Dark dreams and cold sweats jolt me awake at 3 a.m. I can't sleep. I'm paranoid, helpless, and continually panic about my kids. His legal team has launched an emergency court challenge due to deterioration in mental health, highlighting multiple human rights violations. This isn't punishment, they say. It's a calculated breaking of a man who dared speak, proven by independent expert testimony. Now, some good people are realising what's going on here. Peter Lloyd posted, this was Tommy Robinson after just 9 weeks in solitary confinement. Today, he'll be serving his 129th day in complete isolation at HMP Woodhill for a civil offence. This is psychological torture being used by the British state to destroy him, and this was the video he was referring to.
How are you feeling right now? You seem very emotional.
Mm-hmm. It's more, yeah. I'd say that my thing is because I know I'm going home to my kids and you just won't be normal.
It seems that 9 weeks locked up on your own can have an effect on anyone.
Yeah, it's embarrassing.
With Ross Kemp there. But still, even today, Tommy Robinson is being denied visitors by prison authorities. The latest being Fair Fuel campaigner and former Reform UK London mayoral candidate Howard Cox, who revealed on X this afternoon, I requested a second visit to see Tommy Robinson, but for no declared reason I have been refused. My visit on February 4th was helpful to understand the man. It was inspirational and was no threat to anyone. This decision stinks of pure political interference. And Howard Cox joins me now on the Superstar panel alongside Reform UK supporter Nicholas Lissack. Howard Cox, great to have you, but do you share the fear that Ezra Levant of Rebel News and Jordan Peterson have articulated so beautifully, as they always do, that Tommy Robinson's life is now under serious threat?
Well, it has to be, Dan, and thanks for having me on again. The thing is, I saw him on February the 4th. I spent 2 hours with him, and in that 2 hours, as you know, I had to sign an NDA. I couldn't disclose what we discussed, but in that time, he showed incredible stoicism. He was brave, he was kind, he didn't knock anyone. He was absolutely, for me, inspirational. I didn't know him from Adam until that day. And as you know, I've left Reform Party because I stood up for him, and I was basically threatened with being expelled from Reform, the party that I believe in. But I'm afraid what we're seeing right across the whole political spectrum is a complete ignorance, and I think some sort of a cohesion of decision making whereby they're using him as an example. Now, I think it's being driven from number 10, of course, but I do believe his life is he was very emaciated when I saw him, and he's not eating properly. They took food away from him. He was only eating tuna, 1 tin of tuna a day, that sort of thing. But all I can say to you, the man is incredible, and we must do something about it. For a civil crime to be in solitary for so long is abhorrent beyond belief, and our politicians should look themselves in the mirror every day and say what we're doing to this man.
It's absolutely terrifying, isn't it? Absolutely terrifying. Father Calvin Robinson has posted on this This is cruel and unjust. Tommy Robinson has spent over 4 months in solitary confinement, isolated for 22 hours a day for contempt of court. A prison can only put someone in solitary for 42 days. To extend it beyond that, they must have approval from the Home Office. Prolonged solitary confinement is isolation lasting for more than 15 days, as various studies show that the effects of solitary confinement may be irreversible after this time period. The state is trying to break Tommy Robinson. The judge, the prison warden, and the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper are all culpable in this wickedness. Now, Nicholas Lissack, obviously there are big divisions within Reform UK over Tommy Robinson, but your leader, Nigel Farage, who previously had been very harsh about him, quite recently spoke out in America at the CPAC conference against his terrible treatment behind bars. Do you think that, and obviously Rupert Lowe has also written to the Justice Department about the solitary confinement. Do you think this is an issue that Reform UK should be discussing and taking on, given the complete ignorance of it from the Uni Party? I mean, really only Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe have spoken out about this at all in terms of politicians.
Well, politics aside, what's only happening to Tommy from what his team has said is little short of horrendous, quite frankly. Being isolated to that extent is just well and truly horrific. And whether you agree with Tommy Robinson or not, this is about basic human dignity and basic human decency. And he is not being afforded the same rights as other prisoners. And so I think it's only right that Farage raised the alarm about his status, as it's just really, really, really terrible. I mean, isolation does very, very, very strange things to people. For example, in the 1970s in Iceland, the Icelandic police arrested 6 people, and after chucking them in isolation, only for a few days, they were so mentally gone by that point that they admitted to murders that had never occurred. And so isolation is the cruelest form of punishment. It's just horrendous. But another thing that I think is being somewhat ignored here is, if the Home Office is pretty apparent that, considering how it's 42 days in isolation is the maximum, what's happening to the other people arrested over the summer? Because Tommy Robinson has millions upon millions of eyes on him. He's world famous. Everybody knows who he is. But what about the little guys who were also arrested? How are they being treated? And that is something that should also receive equal amount of attention, because, as we're well aware, Peter Lynch tragically took his own life at HMP Woodhill under very similar circumstances.
Well, indeed, and the Peter Lynch case is absolutely disgusting. I mean, they call him a rioter there on that BBC article. He wasn't a rioter. I've watched the video. He was an anti-establishment protester. And you are right, of course, Nicholas, that the officials and the establishment say that he took his own life in prison. Well, I haven't seen any evidence of that. We know that Sly News's crime editor, Martin Brunt, very well-connected guy, had reported specifically that Muslim gangs were intending to target the so-called rioters behind bars. So I actually really need to know more about the Peter Lynch situation, but of course the mainstream media have just moved on. Liam Tufts, really great guy, businessman, podcaster, but in this context, very close friends with Tommy Robinson, has posted on X, "As a friend, I don't repeat what's spoken about during prison visits with Tommy Robinson and stick to the NDA terms that I willingly sign. I will never jeopardize my visits, as they're important to his mental well-being, and my job is to keep him smiling, and by God, he needs that more than ever right now. He needs immediate change to his conditions. He is not in jail for murdering children. He's a civil prisoner and should be treated accordingly. He's entitled to weekend home leaves and the ability to work away from prison grounds. The system wants to break him and are doing a good job in doing so. Remember, he's only guilty of reporting the truth, which is something British journalists should all be guilty of. The government have proved their point, and it has now reached a point of disgrace. Free Tommy Robinson immediately. The world is watching." Now, of course, this is such a worrying thing, and I didn't sign an NDA before my visit, to be clear. I've been very open about the fact that I feel some responsibility about this situation, although I'm sure the authorities were planning it anyway. However, it was clearly, in my mind, in the public interest to report the fact that Tommy told me Axel Rudagabana was a practicing Muslim behind bars at Belmarsh Prison. Remember, they were both in Belmarsh at a time after the Southport massacre. Tommy knew that I was going to be reporting on that. But the point is, his conditions are lunacy. Howard Cox, as I say, I signed no NDA, but when I arrived at the prison, I had to be taken to the special wing where Tommy Robinson is housed. Now, it is a wing that was set up for terrorists. It has 16 cells where terrorists, Islam extreme terrorists are meant to be housed. Those 16 cells are now all for Tommy Robinson.
It's astonishing. I went through 14 doors to get to him, and I know for a fact there were about 600 prisoners in the Woodhill prison, but I didn't see one of them. But I was, sheep or shepherd towards Tommy's area, and we sat in a very nice area, nice comfortable chairs, talked to him. There were a couple of warders in the room with me and everything, make sure we weren't talking about things we shouldn't be talking about. My NDA, I don't understand why I had to sign an NDA, because all that happened is of that 2 hours I was with him, 120 minutes, Tommy probably spoke to me for about 110 of them, because he wanted to pour and talk and share what was going on in his life. And the most important thing for him was his family, especially his children. That's what he was talking about. And I learned so much about the man. There's not a bad bone in that man. He was just doing things right. And, he highlighted the child rape gangs in a big way. I didn't know anything about them until I started looking into Tommy Robinson. And I repeat, and I said it at a rally in Whitehall. I spoke out in front of tens of thousands of people, all of them supposedly allegedly right-wing thugs, so they weren't. They're all decent people. But I called on our wonderful hierarchy of politicians, leaders of Labour, the Tories, and all of the other parties to get together and go and see Tommy and put all their grievances behind them and discuss how they can work together when he comes out. Obviously, I want him out now, but the point is what they're doing just to hide him under the carpet. And I just don't understand why they're scared. Not one question has been asked in Parliament about him. And Lindsay Hoyle even stopped any talk about the Southport killing. And so from my point of view, I went in there, signed the NDA, and I've got to respect it. It's like Liam, because I've been on Liam's podcast as well. And all I can say to you is that I respect you guys for keeping his name in the forefront of all of our minds, because that man, to me, is a hero.
Breaking right now, the Reform UK civil war has just burst into the public consciousness. Now, I've been speaking about this for a number of weeks, a number of months. That makes many of you unhappy. But it's not my personal opinion. It's just what's going on behind closed doors in the insurgent party, which is top of every single national poll at the moment, but for the first time where there are serious question marks around Nigel Farage's future leadership. So look at this headline in the Daily Mail today. Elon Musk-backed Reform MP Rupert Lowe reveals how he would save Britain. And as Pierce posted on X, we could have a Reform PM after the election, but it might not be Nigel Farage. Rupert Lowe spoke to me about his tough line on immigration. I think he'll be very popular, but let me know what you think. And I have read this interview, and let's just say, and I love Rupert Lowe, by the way, and I also love Nigel Farage, but let's just say Rupert isn't holding back. He says it's too early to know whether Nigel will deliver the goods. He can only deliver if he surrounds himself with the right people. He says Nigel is a fiercely independent individual and extremely good at what we have done so far. But, and this is a big but, we have to change from being a protest party led by the Messiah into being a properly structured party with a front bench, which we don't have. We have to start behaving as if we are leading and not merely protesting. He went on to say, Nigel is at the core of everything, but he has to learn to delegate, as not everything can go through one person. Now, knowing Nigel like I do, he ain't gonna like this. He's not gonna like this at all from Rupert Lowe. And there are other divisions in the party, of course. When Dan Hodges posted on X, he's the Mail columnist, like I said a couple of weeks ago, Rupert Lowe has clearly had his head turned by Elon Musk's endorsement. There is a big bust-up coming inside Reform. Ben Habib replied that he's the former Reform UK deputy leader, saying nothing has gone to Rupert's head. He's grounded and sensible. And of course, what this interview has done is allow the mainstream media to pile on and the Uni Party to pile on and say, look, these divisions in Reform UK are not good. Take this from Christopher Hope, the political editor of GB News. Are the wheels wobbling at Nigel Farage's Reform UK party? So far today, Rupert Lowe has raised questions about Farage's leadership and whether he might be PM. Official Electoral Commission figures show that the Tories raised £6 for every £1 raised by Reform from October to December last year. And Deputy Leader Richard Tice apparently forgets the surnames of two councillors who have defected to his party in Scotland. Here's that video.
I've got John and Ross, and
Well,
they're from. Are you going to challenge me on a review? We're going to ask a policy question. Well, I'm answering policy questions.
What are the surnames?
I'm asking policy questions about how we make people better
My
off.
question.
Good.
My choice of question.
And John and Ross.
To you is what
And
are
the
their full
John and
names
Ross.
and what councillors are they from?
John and Ross.
What councillors are they from?
Next question.
You cannot
next?
tell me who your council
Who's the
defectors
next?
are today. Why not? Do you know anything about Scottish politics? You can't even name your own members up here.
Well, I would say that is a pathetic gotcha from the mainstream media. But remember, those pathetic gotchas are going to continue, given that Reform UK are stubbornly ahead in every single national poll, including a new one released today. So, two perfect men to discuss this on my Superstar panel today. Nicholas Lissack is a Reform UK supporter, a serious ally of Nigel Farage. Howard Cox was Reform UK's big gun, one of their stars. He ran for the party at the London mayoral election, but had a falling out with Farage and the leadership over Tommy Robinson and has since left the party. So, Howard, this is really interesting. It feels like Reform UK is developing into two camps. You have Rupert Lowe with folk like Elon Musk, yourself, Ben Habib, and then you have Farage. Where do you stand on this fascinating interview that Rupert's given to the Daily Mail?
Well, first, let me just say it's important, Dan, to understand I'm still wholeheartedly believe in Reform UK. There's no other alternative to actually who should be running this country. I do have questions about Nigel's leadership, but I've known him for 10 years. I've worked with him on the Fairfield UK campaign when he was with UKIP and with the Brexit Party. But to cut a long story short, I got, and I've said it on your show before, that I was sent a text just 3 or 4 days before I decided to leave the party from a major leader of the party, and it was Richard Tice, who said, look, if you continue to support Tommy Robinson, you will be expelled. Why didn't they say that to Rupert Lowe? Because what Rupert Lowe has said since, and at the same time as I did, exactly what I said, that this man is being treated wrongly. And Nicholas, bless his heart, who I've got a lot of respect for here, he also said the same thing. It's nothing to do with you support Rupert. I support Rupert Lowe, by the way. It doesn't if you support Tommy or not. It's all about actually human decency and the human right of an individual, and especially now his health. And what I'm saying is, why the hell isn't all of the 5 MPs, the glorious famous 5 of Reform, coming together and supporting Tommy Robinson and getting him out of prison? And you don't have to support what he stands for. I don't care about it, but I think they do support him because he's just highlighting child rape gangs. So going back to Rupert Lowe, Rupert Lowe was the only person on the day I stood as London Mayor to come to me. He rang. There wasn't anyone from headquarters from Reform when I put my vote in the ballot box in Westminster. I expected to have a camera crew or a couple of people with an iPhone or two to take a picture of me, casting my vote. No one was in sight whatsoever. Nigel wasn't leader of the party then either, so he didn't come out and support it. The only person who was there was Rupert Lowe, and he came to see me and he stood there, took some pictures, and that man has been honest. He doesn't take a salary. He is truly in it for the country.
And he is a great guy. I mean, he is a great guy. Rupert Lowe is an absolutely great guy. Interestingly, Isabel Oakeshott, brilliant journalist and the partner of Richard Tice, the deputy leader of Reform UK, has posted on X in clearly a riposte to Rupert Lowe, saying Reform leader Nigel Farage is the single biggest threat to Labour and the Tories. The idea that anyone else could begin to do what he does is comical. Do you agree, Nicholas?
Well, of course I agree with Isabel, and as you're well aware, I am a big Nigel Farage fan. I posted on X earlier today reaffirming my support for Farage. He is the only man who is capable of leading the party right now, and there will be a Reform government after the next general election. There will be a Reform Prime Minister, and his name is Nigel Farage. And that's all I really have to say on that issue. But going back to Tommy Robinson, as I pointed out earlier, as Howard reiterated, you don't have to agree with Tommy Robinson. You don't even really have to like him, but you have to acknowledge that his treatment is pretty appalling. And if they can do it to him, they can do it to you too. He's not a terrorist. He's in there on contempt of court, and he shouldn't be housed with the terrorists.
Now, it's really interesting. Nigel Farage has just spoken out against Rupert Lowe. I haven't seen this yet. So it's an interview with Harry Cole, the political editor of The Sun, on Talk TV. Let's all watch it together. But I'd say it's very clear, based on what I'm told is Nigel's response, that this is a wedge developing in the Reform UK party. Let's watch.
But there's a lot of text coming in today about your old mate and colleague, Rupert Lowe. Now, he, I'm sure you've read it, popped up in a rival newspaper we're not going to mention that wasn't The Sun this morning, and he said it's too early to know whether Nigel will deliver the goods. He can do, but he's a fiercely independent individual, and it's been good so far, but he has messianic qualities. But will these distill into leadership? I don't know. We have to change from being a protest party led by the Messiah, which I think is you, but you are a very naughty boy, to being a properly structured party with a front bench, which we don't have. We need to start behaving as if we are leading and not merely protesting. That is a shot across your bows, isn't it?
Party.
That's a shot across your bows, though, isn't it?
We are not a protest party in any way at all. That is utterly wrong. Utterly, completely wrong. We are an entirely positive party. Come to any Reform event and the positivity, the energy, and perhaps you should come to one or two.
I've been. I came to your one in Birmingham. There were fireworks.
Well, look, do you know what? If I've got a following out there, that's a good thing. If I hadn't, we wouldn't have won any seats in Parliament at all on the 4th of July.
Including Great Yarmouth, I presume you put in that.
Wouldn't have been a cat's chance in hell, would there? Come on, be honest about it.
Well, why
We're not a protest party, and he's on the front bench.
Yeah.
So what's he talking about? But with only 5 people, you can't really have a shadow cabinet, can you?
Well, you can fit the whole shadow cabinet in a taxi, can't you? So
we've got a lot of development to do, but we're absolutely not a protest party. And you know something? If you saw the level of development we've undergone in the last 8 months, we've created a constitution for the party. We've changed the share ownership and structure of the party. We've set up 400 branches around the country. Yeah, some are embryonic. And right now, within 10 yards of me, we are working hard to get 1,500 vetted candidates into the field for the English local elections on the 1st of
So
May.
why is Rupert Lowe going public with these comments? There's not something better to be had behind closed doors?
Well, perhaps he wants to be Prime Minister. Most people in politics do. You know that, Harry. Half the House of Commons.
I know you want to be Prime Minister. But
half the House of Commons think they should be Prime Minister.
Have you had a word with him?
His comments are wrong. His comments are wrong. We are making gigantic strides.
Are you told him to wind his neck in then?
No point telling him what to do or what not to do. Fact is, we are making...
Wow, there you go. Okay, I mean, quite clear this civil war, which has been going on behind the scenes, has now burst out in public. Howard Cox. I mean, that is absolutely strong from Nigel Farage. He's wrong. He's completely wrong. No point me telling him what to do, and conceding that he wants to be Prime Minister, or that he thinks Rupert Lowe wants to be Prime Minister. Your response?
Well, it's very simple. I mean, there's the classic showing of the Messiah, and there's about 30 or 40 branches that have contacted me they've been dumped. A lot of people who've chosen their people to be actually, very parliamentary prospective candidates or council people who've been dumped and been told from central office based on a vetting procedure, which I don't understand what's going on. There's a lot of loyal people who've got Nigel to where he is now, and he's actually dumped them on the wayside. There's a lot of political corpses who are very loyal to him, and I could list them, but I won't embarrass them now. But Rupert Lowe is a good man, is a brilliant politician. He's not after to take the major job. He still supports Nigel. I still support Nigel. I still support the Reform UK Party. But he's got to get to realise that it's not just a one-man band. He cannot be a one-man band, and that's what he's become. I went to the farmers' protest on Tuesday, and Nigel was there, and around him was about 30 people almost worshipping him. Oh, it's Nigel, it's Nigel. It's unbelievable. We've got to talk about policies. I want Reform UK to do well, but they won't do well unless they start listening to the grassroots.
Nicholas, how do you respond to that?
Well, I wholeheartedly support Farage. I do like Lowe. I think he has been good in Parliament, but Farage is the only leader for reform. And we're fielding hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of candidates. We've got loads and loads and loads of brilliant things coming up, loads of absolutely fantastic events. The event in Birmingham on the 28th of March, where we're going to launch the local election campaign, is going to be really, really, really terrific. And Reform is not a protest party. We are a legitimate opposition to the government.
Yeah,
in fact,
I actually do agree with that.
I can argue that turquoise is the new blue. Quite frankly, we've overtaken the Tories.
The problem, Howard Cox, with this type of divide is that the Uni Party see this as their opportunity to slam reform. So let me give you two examples of this that have just emerged in the past hour. Chris Philp, the shadow Home Secretary of the Conservative Party, has said this warfare at the top of reform just goes to show that their MPs are more concerned with their own egos and advancing their personal ambitions rather than standing up for the British people. With one of Farage's most senior MPs doubting his leadership abilities and admitting that Reform is a protest party with no plan, it is clear that Reform are not serious and will always put self-interest above national interest. The British people deserve solutions, not just empty slogans. And a Labour spokesperson has just responded as well, saying it is open warfare in Reform's ranks. But while Nigel Farage's top team fight amongst themselves, it is their plans that would harm the public in areas like healthcare. We know Farage wants to charge patients thousands to access treatment. Oh, he doesn't. I mean, Labour are liars. They are liars. Then he says, but Rupert Lowe himself also calls the NHS a fraud. Just imagine the chaos this lot would unleash if they got into power. It's just not a risk worth taking. Sorry, I could barely read that statement, Howard, because Labour are liars. I mean, I actually want Farage to go a lot further when it comes to NHS reform. He's already said everything's going to remain free at the point of use. But can you see that the Uni Party are going to be using this big time?
Well, that's all they've got, isn't it? I mean, this is the problem. We're in a situation with Labour and the Tories. If it wasn't for the fact that the Labour is so bad and the Tories absolutely blew it at the last election, Reform UK wouldn't be doing so well. There is a need for Reform UK. We need a centre-right party to bring the millions of people who are homeless in terms of votes. I'm a Thatcherite, and I want to see Reform UK deliver Thatcherite-type policies. Like you, Dan, I actually agree that we should go further on various things, particularly on the NHS, and especially protecting our borders. All of those things, I'm right behind Reform UK, but they need to talk policies rather than worry about fighting each other. Reform UK, I mean, in the case of Rupert Lowe, I think his article has been taken slightly out of context, but Nigel needs to listen. He's not always right. And Nicholas has got it right. He is the one that's going to be the Prime Minister in, I think, sooner than the 2029. I think it could be in 2027. I think it could happen soon. But when you get a situation whereby I stood for London election, I also came second down in Dover. I got 23% of the vote after 3.5 weeks of campaigning. No one has spoken to me from the headquarters since last July. Not one person. That's how they treat their grassroots people. And that's why I'm angry with people, because I get non-stop messages from people who feel as though they've been let down by the headquarters, particularly by Zia Youssef.
Breaking right now, 2 two-tier justice in two-tier Britain has been exposed by the Shadow Justice Secretary, the man who, let's all be honest, should be the Conservative Party leader if they had any hope of avoiding extinction, Robert Jenrick. Now, this is on the front page of the Daily Mail today. It is incredibly concerning because it shows that there is now blatant discrimination against straight white men. Robert Jenrick summed this up very nicely earlier today.
So sentencing guidelines published today that I've uncovered shows that you're less likely to go to jail for exactly the same crime if you're a woman, if you're an ethnic minority, if you're trans, if you're neurodiverse, if you're from a minority faith group, i.e. anyone who isn't Christian. It's outrageous. Frankly, it's blatant bias against straight, white men. People said that those of us who were worried about two-tier justice were wronged. The Deputy Prime Minister said that we were conspiracy theorists. Well, now we have it in the law of the land in black and white. There's two-tier justice under two-tier care.
Two-tier justice under two-tier care. He also had a strong performance on this in Parliament.
Turning to the new sentencing guidelines that's been published alongside this statement, which will make a custodial sentence less likely for, and I quote, ethnic minorities, cultural minorities, and faith minority communities. Why is the Justice Secretary enshrining this double standard, this two-tier approach to sentencing? This is an inversion of the rule of law. We on this side of the House believe in equality under the law. Why doesn't she?
Well, of course, the absolute lying, awful Shabnam Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, lied about this.
And then let me just say finally, as somebody who's of an ethnic minority background myself, I do not stand for any differential treatment before the law for anyone of any kind, and there will never be a two-tier sentencing approach under my watch or under this Labour government.
Absolute bull. Absolute bull. And she's expressed her displeasure today after Robert Jenrick's revelation. Well, expressing your displeasure isn't enough. You've got to stop this racism against straight white men. And I have to say, watching Jenrick's performance, and look, as you know, I'm no fan of the Uni Party, but watching his performance makes me think, I do think Robert Jenrick would be a good Prime Minister. My preference would be for him to defect to Reform UK, but the Tories would be in with so much more of a fighting chance if they had gone for this man, because he's a strong media performer too. Watch him with Mike Graham earlier.
What's going on with this two-tier justice nonsense?
Well, look, the sentencing guidelines that we uncovered yesterday are a complete disgrace. They show that if you're a woman, if you're neurodiverse, if you're trans, if you're an ethnic minority, if you're from a minority faith group, presumably anyone who isn't Christian, then you are going to get a different treatment under the law. You are less likely to get a custodial sentence. Frankly, this is blatant bias against Christians and straight white men. And many, many people will be rightly furious at this. Your viewers and listeners were sneered at when they said that there was two-tier justice in this country. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, said that we were conspiracy theorists for saying so. Well, here it is, in black and white, the law of the land, the Sentencing Council issuing guidance to every magistrate in this country, telling them to treat people differently on the colour of their skin or the faith that they abide by. It's wrong and it needs to be stopped.
It seems incredible that it's even legal, doesn't it? I mean, Shabnam Mahmood yesterday put out a statement saying that the Sentencing Council is entirely independent, but it strikes me as rather inefficient of her, to say the least, that she doesn't know what they're about to do or what they want to do.
Well, quite. These sentencing guidelines were signed off in a meeting with all the bigwigs from the legal system, including her own representative, one of the most senior civil servants at the Ministry of Justice. So either she knew about this, and it is her policy, but now she's having to change tack because people are so furious with it, or she was totally asleep at the wheel, had no idea what was going on in her own department. Either way, it's a terrible reflection. Look,
Nicholas Lissack, can we just be honest about this, please? There is now open discrimination under this sick Labour government against straight white men. Anti-white racism is now commonplace in the UK. And I'm sorry, I am going to keep calling it out as I have for many years because it is wrong, wrong, wrong.
You're absolutely right, Dan. It is extremely wrong. It's quite frankly appalling that the government is actually willing to implement such ridiculous guidelines. I mean, if you think about it, we've gone from last summer, them gaslighting the public by saying, oh no, two-tier justice doesn't exist, to enshrining it in law. And we're only a few weeks away from a Guardian article coming out basically saying, oh my God, two-tier justice is wonderful and we should all support it. It is ridiculous. This is an absolute joke. It doesn't, whatever skin color you have, whatever your sexual orientation, whatever your religion, the crime that you commit, it's your sentence should not be determined by what skin color you are. We should live in a colorless society. And I just think it's well and truly ridiculous. This has gone beyond equity. This is, in effect, as you point out, anti-white discrimination and anti-straight discrimination in a sense as well. And it's a joke. It's an absolute joke. If you commit a crime, irrespective of your skin color, you should face the maximum punishment if your crime is as bad as, it is.
Yes, and also anti-Christian. Can I just point out anti-Christian? We're meant to be a Christian country, Howard Cox. And there are countless examples of this, countless examples. You only have to look at all of the poor souls languishing in prison after the so-called riots following the Southport massacre, not to mention the grandmothers like Julie Sweeney, the mothers like Lucy Connolly, but they were white, they were Christian, they got jail terms of over 2 years. Yet we know that there are Muslim men who have quite literally beaten up women for dressing in a Western manner. And they haven't received a day behind bars. So I think this is already happening, Howard. It might not be official, but it's already part of our left-wing judiciary.
Well, Dan, I can't put it any better than you. You are so articulate in getting that message across. This is institutionalized racism. And I'm not going to get any, soften that particular statement. But it's more than that, though. That's one side of it. But the other side of it is the two-tier justice, the sentencing. We're looking at someone like, we talked about Tommy Robinson, getting for a civil offence, going into solitary confinement. You get Mike Ainsbury, he beat the Watsits out of a constituent, and he gets a 2-year suspended sentence. I mean, everything is wrong about the institution, our justice system, and it's not being addressed by either party. And, Robert Jenrick, I worked very closely with him when he was in the Treasury about 7 years ago when I was working on cutting fuel duty. Robert Halford introduced me to him, the great MP for Harlow, who's now not long with us in terms of being an MP. He introduced me to Robert Jenrick, and I was so impressed with his decisiveness, getting the message, getting his brief right with what I was working on. And I was impressed then. And you're dead right. He should be leading the Tory party.
He should. I mean, Nicholas, let's just talk about the pure politics of this, right? Jenrick was so much more of a threat. And I would argue actually remains so much more of a threat to your man Farage and Reform UK than Kemi Badenoch, who has been utterly hopeless. I mean, she's a joke. She's laughable. But arguably, I think this could work out better for Jenrick because she plays the Ian Duncan Smith role, couple of years in the leadership. He then is able to take charge when actually people are maybe prepared to forgive the Conservative Party. Now, I know everyone's going to say, no one's going to forgive the Conservative Party. Personally, I'm not, right? Even with Jenrick as leader, I'm not voting for the Conservatives. So this isn't my personal position. But I see him as more of a threat to Reform UK. I really do.
I actually completely disagree with you, Dan. Everything about Jenrick is very, very, very surface level. He's a nice guy.
You think he's a fake?
Well, I would say I find it very, very, very convenient how he went from an extremely pro-European politician to the moment Reform UK surged at the last general election to effectively going right to, to the right of Genghis Khan.
A Damascene conversion, you might say.
Yes, I think it's awfully convenient and very telling. So, all Reform has to do is point out Jenrick's extremely pro-EU record and the
Yeah.
fact that only until about 5 minutes ago he was licking Brussels's boots, and that will sort of
And he loved
eliminate.
Rishi Sunak. He loved Rishi Sunak for a period as well.
Exactly. But on another note, I think that
But he got on the
many.
Ozempic, lost all the weight, and all of a sudden got sound political positions.
Yeah, well, exactly. But I think another issue that Jenrick is facing on another level is simply the fact that he is a flip-flopper. And I think that many, many, many Tory MPs would much rather pick Badenoch over Jenrick because, who knows where Jenrick's going with his political philosophy. For all we know, if, Reform were to suddenly cease to exist, he'd go back to being, a massive Europhile. In my view, Jenrick has spied an opportunity, and don't get me
But you'd
wrong,
want him in Reform. Come on. If Robert Jenrick said he would defect tomorrow, what a brilliant shadow Home Secretary he would be for Reform UK.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen. He's not going to defect to Reform. That's not going to happen. I think he is firmly rooted in the Conservative Party. I think he certainly has his eyes on leadership. Whether or not he actually gets to leadership, I don't entirely think so. I think enough Tory MPs think he is a flip-flopper and don't necessarily trust him. This is from what I've heard hanging around in the Westminster sphere. But he's not going to defect. No matter how many people on Twitter may post these photos saying, "Oh my God, Robert Jenrick is about to defect," it's not going to happen. In my view, he has his eyes on Tory party leadership, but all Reform has to do is simply show his record to the British public, and I think all of the hype around him will very quickly dissipate. However, I will say this: I like him as a person. I've spoken to him through Twitter. He's a nice guy. He follows me. I follow him back. He's a lovely guy, but I don't think he's that big of a threat to Reform, quite frankly.
Okay, stand by. Our superstar panel, Nicholas Lissack and Howard Cox. Much more from you in just 1 minute, because I'm launching a brand new segment. You are going to absolutely love this. Looney Lefties Go Wild. And featuring in our first edition, oh my God, some really horrible people. Horrible people. But we're calling them out. Donica McCarthy, Ashley James, Marina Purkis, Paul Brand, Kathy Newman. Sly News. Don't let that put you off, though, because this is the segment where we call them out for their ridiculous lunacy. That's coming up in just 1 minute. Don't go anywhere. Promise you're going to love it. But first, do you know that sleeping less than 6 hours per night doubles the risk of early death? Poor sleep is also linked to obesity, heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, depression, and a weakened immune system. Now, personally, I've struggled with sleep for a while. I tried everything, actually, but found it really difficult to wind down and get to bed before 2 a.m., which I know is pretty late. But I'm not alone. Actually, the CDC reports over 35% of adults in the US sleep less than the recommended 7 hours. Many sleep supplements contain melatonin and other ingredients that create dependencies, cause morning grogginess, and lose their effectiveness over time. So that's why I take Evening Bean, a brand new product by the amazing team at Verso. After 3 years of perfecting the formula, they created a melatonin-free drink mix with clinically studied, patented ingredients. It's formulated to calm an active mind, help you fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and improve deep and REM sleep, all without creating dependencies or causing morning grogginess. I really look forward to drinking Evening Bean every night, actually, not only because it's helping me fall asleep faster, but it actually just tastes so good. This is like my new nightcap before bed. By the way, totally fine if you're vegan or on the keto diet. So just click in the show description or head on over to evening.ver.so/outspoken and use the coupon code outspoken at checkout. You'll save 15% on your first order. So try Evening Bean tonight and wake up feeling refreshed tomorrow. That's evening.ver.so/outspoken. Use the coupon code outspoken at checkout to save 15%. But now back to the show. Looney Lefties Go Wild. This is where we expose some of the worst people in the world for their lies, for their downright nastiness, and for all of the things that they claim people like me do, when actually it's them who are the real degenerates in a lot of cases. Today, our launch features some truly terrible folk. Marina Perkins, Ashley James, Paul Brand, Sly News, all on the way. Oh, Kathy Newman too. But first I want to kick off with one of the biggest loony lefties of them all. This is a man called Donica McCarthy. He's actually really dangerous, right? He wants us all to become vegan. He's a total climate extremist. He was revolting when they used to force me to have him on my GB News show. Actually, I ended up banning him, I think. But he still turns up with Nigel Farage and spouts this type of rubbish. By the way, I've got to reintroduce my superstar panel because they're watching along with me today. Fair Fuel campaigner Howard Cox, Reform UK supporter Nicholas Lissack. We're going to call out these loony lefties. So let me just introduce you to the type of guy that Donica McCarthy is.
In the green transition, you create jobs and you actually benefit the economy, you benefit the NHS, you benefit jobs, and you actually benefit the protection of Britain. So it's not either or. And the fascinating thing about net zero...
We cannot make a difference to the global climate.
The Telegraph article always focuses on cost. And you've worked in the city, you know economics, you know we have to count both sides of the balance sheet. The Telegraph talks about costs, it doesn't talk about benefits.
I repeat the point. We on our own cannot change what the amount of CO2 is in the global atmosphere.
We can actually make our contribution to it. Just like we can make our contribution to defence.
Economic harry-carry.
Defence and... No.
Yeah, so he's infuriating, this guy. He wants us all to be vegan, right? All of that. But check out what happened. He was on the panel. He was on the panel with Kwasi Kwarteng, who is the former Chancellor of the UK under Liz Truss. Now, Kwasi Kwarteng is a black guy. He's a black member of the Conservative Party, but a very accomplished politician who you should easily recognise if you know anything about politics. But look at what went down.
And no, not the economic harry. Our economy has gone up by 150% as James Cleverly's government oversaw the... James Cleverly? Sorry, James. Sorry, I apologise.
Maybe you should have been. Quasi, I was in government. Quasi, I mean, this is all nonsense.
Whilst he was in government, our carbon emissions came down 50% and our economy grew.
And our steel industry disappeared, and cement disappeared, and refining disappeared.
I think where you've got it slightly wrong, Nigel.
So if you missed that, the reason he had his head in his hands is because he confused that man, Kwasi Kwarteng, with James Cleverly. Yes, another black man, but they look totally different. And the reason that I find this so egregious, Howard Cox, is like, Farage just laughed along. Oh, yeah, you've made a mistake. Move on. Trust me, if that had been a white presenter on the right confusing two left-wing black Labour politicians like Dawn Butler and Diane Abbott, there would have been calls for their head. They would have been cancelled.
Donica and I have a history, Dan. You may not know this. But
I don't know.
Well, it also involves legals. He's actually accused me. He was very libelous to me on social media. He accused me of being a mass murderer of children because I support fossil fuels.
He really is a loony.
Absolutely right. And the man, I mean, when I go on to various shows like GB and Talk TV and other programs, they say I'm up against an environmentalist. I say, who is it? And if it's Donica, I said, forget it. I'm not going on. Because I'm scared of him, because I could destroy him. I mean, to be fair, Nigel did a good job with him. We can't do anything in terms of net zero. All we're going to do is bankrupt us all.
Totally. And the thing is, by the way, Nicholas, I'm not saying people don't make mistakes, but what I hate is that it's totally fine if you make those sorts of mistakes on the left. But if you make those sorts of mistakes on the right, the left will literally have you cancelled for it.
Of course, it's a perfect example of rules for thee, but not for me.
Yep.
And Howard, I cannot believe that anybody accused you of being a mass murderer of children. I mean, that is just...
That's a little bit too far. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to the next loony lefty gone wild. And oh my goodness, this is a hard watch, but I'm going to give you the truth about this one. So two of the most awful people in Britain, a real trollop called Marina Purkis and this other woman. Oh my goodness, I actually can't remember her name because she's so irrelevant. She's like a TV shopping presenter on QVC trying to reinvent herself as like a Carol Vorderman style leftist. Genuinely can't remember her name. I used to appear with her every now and then on Jeremy Vine, and she was honestly so repulsive to be around. So she's not a nice woman. They host on a show someone called Ashley James. Now, Ashley James used to be on Made in Chelsea. She was a reality star. I gave her a break in TV news on GB News. And we always had, I believed, a very good working relationship. And Ashley was very grateful for her time on GB News. But now that she's turned to the hard left, let's have a look at what she has to say about her time on the channel.
Oh, yes. But in the GB News building, I had like everyone from my nightmares. So
you did quite a stint there, didn't you?
I did it for a year.
Yeah.
I got really depressed during that time, but I feel like it was actually really good to get into the minds of people who think like that. It was really good training in terms of what I do now, because I know that I can hold my own around anyone, because if you can survive as a liberal lefty in the GB News building, then you can kind of do anything. But it was really quite bleak. I remember being like,
quite bleak.
This is just basic right and wrong. There's no way they can argue with this. And then I go in and be like, oh, wow, they found an angle.
Okay, let me tell you, Ashley James wasn't depressed during her time at GB News. That woman used to call the paps every single time she entered the GB News office. She literally called a paparazzi to photograph her going in. Anyway, then things turn really nasty with a woman whose name I forget, Marina Purkis, when they decide to turn on the brilliant, the spectacular, outspoken regular Alex Phillips. Watch.
Alex Phillips, who's a regular on GB News, was saying it was a wonderful idea. I'm like, are you kidding?
So with the GB News lot, I do wonder with some of them, is it an act? Like, for example, I think people like maybe Nana Akua, I know this is pure speculation.
Don't be racist, pronounce the name properly.
What to do to maintain that career in the right-wing media.
Yeah.
I don't know that they truly believe their position, whereas Alex Phillips, I think, personal opinion, is batshit enough that she genuinely does believe stuff. Like, she tweeted one day about fancying Netanyahu. And I just thought, what is it about a genocidal maniac that is turning you on? But basically, my point being, when you were there, do you think it was a mix of people who genuinely, like, really believed what they were saying, and those that were just saying it because it guaranteed them
Yeah, do you know what's really interesting? I met at a friend's birthday quite a prolific arsehole, and he was saying to me, the problem with you, Ash, is you're never going to make it because you patronise people, because you say what you think.
The irony.
Yeah. And I was like, well, no, I say what, I was like, I actually would argue that I try really not to be patronising. I try to kind of have a like stance that's like, have you considered this? Facts or kindness, or whatever it is. But I don't do it in a like, you're an idiot way. And he was like, well, no, I just say what people want to think, which is why I'm popular. And I think that sometimes about Piers Morgan as well.
Isn't that interesting? The be kind mob, but if you disagree with her, you're an asshole. It gets worse, though, because Ashley James then makes the argument that most of the people who appeared on GB News during her time at the station, by the way, very accomplished people, were stupid. Now, I'm only speaking out of turn here because of what she's done. I think what she's done is despicable. Ashley James used to read every single thing she said on the show. It was all written down, and actually most of it was just written down. She would literally listen to James O'Brien every day, that madman on LBC, and literally write down whatever she said, and she would read off her notes on the show. So to me, that's stupid. I don't think the people on GB News who were making arguments against her, like Amanda Platel, like Adam Brooks, like Daisy McAndrew, I find it very weird that she would describe them as stupid, but watch.
Some of them are just a bit stupid, and they only read these publications or GB News, and so that's their only sort of
radicalised
information. So
yeah.
they're spouting it because they believe it, because they're not learning the facts. And I remember I'd always sit with this one guy
She's
who
talking about Adam Brooks,
was actually like quite a nice guy, but
Very
like the
nice
opinions
guy.
that would come out of his mouth, I was like, it's so frustrating, especially when you hear like this dehumanisation and demonisation of immigrants as like these dark, mysterious men who are coming to like rape all our women. And it's like, but you're not looking at the facts. Like, the facts are that it's, even in this country, it's like white men. Like, if you look at like even the grooming gangs, of course, it's not that there's an immigrant problem, it's a man problem. And that's across the board of all ethnicities. And it's so weird that they can have like such cognitive dissonance that they're like, oh, well, it's not us. So if we say it's men, they're like, not all men, but they're very happy for it to be all trans people and all immigrants.
Sorry, Howard. Sorry, Nicholas. It's the white men. I should have known. It's all your fault.
Go on, Nicholas.
Unfortunately, yes, apparently we're blamed for everything. And I must say, I love how she says that she's not patronising in the most patronising way imaginable. Like, a bit of facts or kindness. I mean, honestly, it is ridiculous. These people, they have
could not be any more patronising, could she? Like, oh, you don't really believe that? I think you're just stupid. No, you're not patronising at all. But probably the thing I got most angry about was this last Gone Wild clip. And it was when she spoke about the night of the late Queen Elizabeth II's death. Now, I hosted a special show on GB News that night. We were all incredibly emotional. We went on for 3 hours. There were no advertising break. And there was such a good camaraderie between the people who I brought together. I'll never forget Christine Hamilton came down on the train. She was so emotional. She was just sobbing on air. And Ashley has used that night specifically to spin a twisted story, specifically about Amanda Platel, I believe, of the Daily Mail. She doesn't name her, but she talks about a female columnist from the Daily Mail, and Amanda Platel was the only female columnist from the Daily Mail who would have been there, as far as I can work out anyway. Watch this.
But I think now there's like a career. There's a career out of slagging off Meghan, and there's a career out of right-wing politics. And one thing that I will say about my experience with GB News, I remember when the Queen died, and so they had like a special episode where all the people from my nightmares were in, and
nasty.
They were like, one Daily Mail journalist came in and she said, oh, I can't wait to slag off Meghan. And I remember thinking, like, you actually are like sick in the head. Like, you want to accuse her of making situations about her, but you're like, she couldn't, like, there's literally no way she could win. And I remember I kind of went in, I think I had to mention her because people were slagging her off, of like, if she went to the funeral, she's attention seeking, and if she doesn't go to the funeral, she's attention seeking. And I said something along the lines of like, leave her alone, we're not even here to talk about her. And when I came out, there was like Calvin Robinson and all the desirables that you want to spend time with, and they were like slagging me off as if I wasn't there, but in front of me.
Calvin is such a gentleman.
I was like,
he would not
it's just
do
so
that.
weird that I'm the bad person.
I mean, I'm so sickened by that story. Now, obviously, I was in the studio for all of those 3 hours, so I haven't witnessed it with myself, but just from the experience of the vibe that night at GB News, the night of the late Queen Elizabeth II's death, I do not believe that happened. And the thing that I find particularly upsetting is Ashley, there were times that Ashley was going through very difficult times during her time on GB News. There was an investigation into her, something to do with her family. I'm not even going to go into that, but we were so supportive of her through it. Howard would always make sure she was okay. And I just think the fact that she's gone and spoken to those two wicked witches, the QVC presenter and that Marina Purkis, in such a derogatory manner is very classless.
This is all new to me. I actually watched your show that night because I was also gutted. I had a lump in my throat most of the night. My wife and I sat and watched it, and I can assure you that that was a beautifully presented show, very tastefully done, and the people on it were very respectful. I don't even remember her at all, and you know, for someone that she's got about as many cells as an amoeba, judging by the way she's speaking on that, and I cannot believe what I've just heard. Some of those things she said. She obviously took the GB News' shilling for appearing.
Totally. Happy to take the money. Happy to take the money. Okay, let's continue with the Looney lefties gone wild. Now, this was the most crazy, right? Sly News, the worst, most failing news organisation in all of the UK. It's so bad that they've had to announce that it's actually going out of business. Remarkably won News Channel of the Year for the 8th consecutive time. Now, that got a lot of people like Camilla Tominlay from GB News raising the alarm. I mean, but these awards are a joke. They're all lefty, right? Then Cathy Newman. You know Cathy Newman, the hard left host of Channel 4 News. She wins the award for Best Presenter and gives this awful sort of self-aggrandizing acceptance video. Watch this.
Wow, it's extraordinary. I feel so proud to win this, well, a couple of awards tonight. Really thrilled. It's an amazing team on Channel 4 News, and you know, there've been a huge team working on this story, the church abuse story, for 8 years. But particularly, you know, producers in TV often don't get the credit. So Claire Sinker, my producer, was absolutely brilliant all the way along. Couldn't have done it without her. And also the guy who brought me the story, Andrew Greystone, who's in the audience tonight, who uncovered a secret that the church didn't want out, and it would probably still be a secret today were it not for him, Andrew Greystone. So it's been a huge team effort, really. So to get this award, which one is it? Network TV Journalist of the Year, you know.
Oh, I just forgot.
We're all a team on TV. You know, I came from newspapers where it was much more kind of one-woman band often, but so it's a massive team effort, and it's just a real thrill to win this in an era when, you know, mainstream media, legacy media, all those terms of abuse really are sort of used to denigrate what we do, but actually dogged, investigative, well-funded public service journalism really makes a difference, and it can still make change.
Well, the reason it's used to denigrate you, Cathy Newman, is because of the fact that the mainstream media in the UK claims to be impartial when it quite clearly isn't. And this is the go wild moment, because Cathy then posts on X. I remember she's trying to claim that she's impartial in an era where Donald Trump jokes about shooting journalists and Elon Musk denigrates legacy media. I thought it was worth pointing out that well-resourced investigative public service journalism can still affect change. Surely, in that one post, Nicholas, she's proving that she is not an impartial journalist, because she's just used Donald Trump and Elon Musk as her whipping boys.
I'm so tired of this, Dan. I'm so tired of all of these people. I mean, God, they are so ridiculous.
Insufferable. Insufferable with their own
I love how she also
self-importance.
pretended to forget the award that she was getting. Like, oh, I have so many awards. Oh, I forgot this one here.
Oh, yeah, and then she looked and she's like, oh, yes, TV Network Broadcaster of the Year, I forgot. Oh, please.
Yeah, not exactly a Nobel Prize, love. But I mean, honestly, she has proved completely that taxpayer-funded broadcasting, government-funded journalism is in effect propaganda, because the British government evidently hates Donald Trump and JD Vance, and so at every opportunity they want to criticize them. And I find it very weird how they actually brought up Trump's obviously joking comment from about 8 years ago.
Oh, exactly. And Elon Musk, by the way, Elon Musk is the guy who has just given us all free speech. Seriously, that is how important he is. And that is annoying to the people at Channel 4 News, because they want to believe that they have a monopoly on the truth. And we know that actually what they do is pump out lies. The most extraordinary one, though, the one I could not get my head around, was Paul Brand winning an award. Paul Brand is a propagandist at Woke ITV. Watch.
Yeah, it's unexpected and a real honour, and really nice actually that both these awards recognise not just the importance of political journalism, but in terms of the Specialist Award too, the importance of the people at the heart of these stories that we told, particularly when it came to assisted dying. These are people in really vulnerable situations, and it's just such an honour that the RTS has recognised the contribution of the two things actually coming together and affecting policy.
So 2 awards, that guy Paul Brand wins, Howard Cox. Now, the issue I have with this is that Paul Brand is a propagandist. He is an activist who pretends to be an impartial journalist. So if you look at his impartial dying work, which is what his assisted dying work, which is what he won it for, he has campaigned effectively. He has used Woke ITV to campaign for assisted dying to be legalized. I don't believe that's the role of a journalist. If you look at his political work, he launched the witch hunt against Boris Johnson when it came to Partygate. He was absolutely obsessed. Did we hear a word about Angela Rayner's rule break? About Keir Starmer's rule breaking from him with the voice coach on Christmas Eve, the glamorous, lovely voice coach who'd had to come down to be with Keir Starmer? Did we hear a word about that from Paul Brand? Nope, nothing. Because he's an activist, not a journalist.
No, it's incredible. I mean, I'm learning so much from your show tonight, Dan. It's quite refreshing to see that I'm actually a normal, common sense person that cares about the grassroots, because the mainstream media has lost their way completely. And this is what's happening right across. Nicholas said about propaganda just now. This is what it's about at the moment. We're not getting honest, independent reporting. And if we had a proper mainstream media, I'd actually go as far as to say that Tommy Robinson probably wouldn't be in jail now. That's the sort of thing that we've got, because he's not getting the support that he deserves. And mainstream media should take a long, hard look in their own proverbial mirrors and say, what the hell have we done to this man?
Big time, big time. Well, I think that was great. Looney lefties go wild. Thank you, Howard Cox. Thank you, Nicholas Lissack. And by the way, you don't need to rely on the MSN anymore. This is now Britain's biggest independent daily news show. We have just hit 100 million views. That's just on YouTube, by the way.
Well done.
GB News announcing that they are suspending Dan Wootton.
The presenter Dan Wootton
Dan Wootton
has been suspended. All eyes are on Ofcom.
Clear infringement of broadcasting rules. Suspended by the channel.
Dan's absence tonight is also beyond my control.
There is.
Now, where was I before I was so rudely interrupted? No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live. Let's go.
We are up against the potential end of Western civilization if we don't fight against this ideology.
I want to ensure that politicians like myself give voice so the silent majority do not feel that they're being ignored, and that will only breed more discontent, more disturbances in our country.
My complete cancellation in the mainstream media is no coincidence, by the way.
I've got nothing left to hide.
I believe Farage will be Prime Minister in 2029.
I've been saying it for a while, Dan, and some of my friends think I should be taken away in a straitjacket.
I survived cancellation because I simply refused to be cancelled.
The royal family owes it to the public to clear up any doubts about anybody in the line of succession. They're really crazed behaviour.
It was a serious possibility that you could be arrested if you stayed in the UK.
Either I'll be arrested at the airport or that I'll be stabbed in the street. I genuinely believe that Islam is dangerous. I don't think it's compatible with the West.
Somebody said to me, he had a verbal fight with Meghan and said, you know, why don't you go out and earn some money?
We are fighting to take our country back. This is the opposition now. I represent you, the silenced majority. And I have to thank Nicholas Lissack and Howard Cox, because you have both been a big part of Outspoken from day one. Love having you on the show. Different voices, talking about different issues, and I hope you'll be back very soon.
Always a pleasure, Dan. Absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, guys. By the way, don't go anywhere, though, because Uni and Jackass, Greatest Britain, coming up in just one moment. First, I did want to go through some of your comments about the very serious story that we kicked off the show with, Tommy Robinson on Death Watch, which is just so disturbing. Stevie wrote, I hope JD Vance can help him. It's disgraceful how the Labour, I like that, Labour government are treating him when murderers and rapists get out early. The Outer Limits posted, Tommy Robinson's best hope is to be offered asylum in the USA, along with immediate citizenship via a diplomatic passport. I mean, that would be great, wouldn't it? You can bet your last penny on the fact that the Southport murderer is living a far better life behind bars. I know. I mean, get your head around that. Margaret Yates says, surely this is a breach of the Human Rights Act. Even prisoners have human rights. And Tim Beaumont, oh, bless you, Tim. I emailed my MP today about the appalling treatment of Tommy. Sadly, my MP is Zara Sultanas, and not much help there. No, She's one of the mad lefties. So very unlikely, unfortunately. Okay, Union Jackass time now. Great nominees from you today. Steve Sheasby went for Shabna Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, for her new sentence guidelines, which have blatant bias against Christians and straight white men. London Snow 251 nominated Narinder Kaur for her hatred on our Dan. Thank you very much. And James O'Brien was nominated by Loose88H. And she said, excuse my French, for that effing haircut. So, look, he's trying to... Sorry, every time I see it, I just crack up. He's trying to cover up the big bruise on his face, which he claims is from a cycling accident. Do we believe that? Do we really believe that? And so now he looks like Hitler. He's got a Hitler hairdo. Oh, goodness. Okay, the results are in. 18% of you have voted Narinder Kaur as today's Union Jackass. 36% of you went for James O'Brien with his Hitler hairdo. But with 40% of the vote, today's Union Jackass, Shabna Mahmood, for that disgusting anti-white man approach to sentencing. And oh my goodness, it's Thursday. So this is so exciting. What we do on Thursday, and I'll do this very soon after the show, is we put our 4 nominees for Union Jackass for the week all up for one mega poll. I think we had something like 60,000 votes last week. And so it's Shabna Mahmood Thursday, Sadiq Khan Wednesday, Mark Rowley Tuesday, Keir Starmer Monday. Wow, that is quite a plethora of options. Do vote. It's in the posts section, or it will be in a little while, in the post section of my page on YouTube, and we'll announce the worst Britain in the world this week at the end of tomorrow's show. But of course, we've got the uncancelled after show coming up, the Royal Greatest Britain. I forgot Greatest Britain, sorry. And this was a great one, nominated by Steve Sheasby as well, Robert Jenrick, for calling out the anti-white bias in the new sentencing guidelines. So he's done very, very well. And those two winners are obviously linked. But yeah, it's great. Uncancelled after show coming up on Substack. www.outspoken.live. We have just hit 40,000 subscribers. Please join the community. It's a really important way for me to keep in touch with you. You just enter your email address into there, and you also get to see the uncancelled after show either live or on demand. Back tomorrow, 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Hit subscribe if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble. Most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you, but I hope to see you on the after show on Substack with According to Taz in just a few moments.